Now, as an educator, the pandemic has presented so many challenges, obstacles. With our students, it's already difficult to reach some of them, and so when you add in physical distance and a virtual wall, it made it almost impossible to reach our students. So upon return, it was great to see students in person again. A lot of our students had been home dealing with situations that they haven't had to, or that no student should really deal with, without the aid of a trusted adult or someone to be in their corner to advocate. And so a lot of our students came back with increased anxiety, signs of depression, acting out in an aggressive physical nature. I'm at an all-boys campus 6 through 8, and so we've seen a lot of aggression. We've seen a lot of people withdrawing. And so just trying to be there, to respond to students who are crying out in different ways, and then also to be there to call in and bring in students who are withdrawn and just holding it all in. All those have been a challenge.
Favorite go-to coping skills for kids. Journaling, something that we just don't do enough of, even as adults. We have really gone away from what is one of the best healing self-care mental health practices around. And it is one of the easiest things we could do to take care of ourselves, one of the most cost-effective things that we could do to care for ourselves and for others, something we don't do enough of. And so really encouraging our young folks when they're really struggling with loss and struggling with grief, encouraging them to sit down and reflect and to write out their feelings, to just put it down on paper so that it frees up a little bit of that mental and emotional bandwidth and not having to carry around that stuff all day.
One of our students' most significant needs right now is resiliency skills. Many of our students are experiencing some significant anxiety and depression as a result of the last 2 years, which has really compounded those feelings of inadequacy, and low self-worth. And they need to know they matter. They need to know how to walk in their truth and feel safe in doing so. And so being able to equip our students with those tools and helping them feel safe, giving them access to that support, and making mental health and emotional wellness appealing and safe is really what we need to concentrate on.
Hey there, my name is Wes Upton, and I wanted to give you a little information about how the pandemic has affected me and affected the students that I work with in the school setting. One of the things that we saw pretty quickly was that the isolation that was part of the pandemic really created some issues in terms of coping mechanisms and understanding how to socialize and that sort of thing. And as we've turned back to school, I think that's been something that's been a big hurdle for us to overcome as the adults working with the students and working with ourselves, quite honestly, but also for something for our students to get accustomed to is getting back into big social settings or what we would call like more traditional social settings. And so the stress and anxiety associated with those interactions and the interfaces and the demands of everyday life really became big quickly again. And so working with our students and honestly ourselves as professionals to make sure that we're ready to step back into that role has probably been the biggest stressor or challenge that I've seen.
Hello. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. Since 2020, we have been dealing with a very difficult world pandemic. As a former educator working during this time as a school intervention counselor, I've noticed the difficulties and the problems this pandemic has placed on faculty, staff, students, and families. Our schools are grieving, and the grief needs to be addressed. School for many represents safety and security. It also is a place to where we form relationships. What do you do when all of that is gone? Imagine missing graduation, prom, birthday parties, events, grandparents, vacations, milestones, and much that you weren't prepared to lose. Tonight, I have gathered some professional educators, counselors, and therapists to have a dialogue regarding what we have witnessed and where we are going. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is having a great evening. This is going to be a great show. I have a great lineup, as you can see, of amazing guests. And I just want to welcome you to our show. We've been doing buried messages for quite some time, but I wanted to put a spin on it. As a former educator and a current therapist, I see so much happening in the school system right now, and so much of it is connected to grief and loss. And I feel with most of our students, there are certain things that are not being addressed. And one of the things I wanted to do was just kind of shed some light and get some insight as to what other educators are seeing, talking to some other therapists and seeing what they are seeing in their offices and going from there. So the first person that I have is one of my good friends, Antoine. He has written an amazing book, and I tell people all the time, I don't give credit just that easily. And when I read the book, I really was impressed at the story, how it takes you through the story, and how he has coping skills that he equips his young Kareem with. So I'm going to bring my author, therapist, grief expert, and brother onto the show right now, and that's Antoine, licensed mental health counselor professional. Let's bring him on up.
Hey, Danny, how are you?
Hey, I want to say thank you so much for pressing through tonight.
Yes.
I know you weren't feeling your best, but I
Absolutely.
really am so excited that you made it. This is such a phenomenal piece
Oh,
of work right here. And he has a
you.
workbook that goes along with it as well. I see Katina Ross on here. She's an educator. Hey, Katina, that's my sister.
Okay. Hey,
And then I
Katina.
see Ann Tanae on here, counselor. All right, great. I got some people showing up. I want y'all to comment. I want you to comment. I want you to comment. We didn't come here to look at y'all. We came here to talk and get some feedback and insight as to what's happening with our students. So, Antoine, I want to ask you, what made you write Kareem Learns to Cope? Well, first of all, let me introduce yourself.
Oh,
Introduce yourself before you even began.
okay. All right. Well, first of all, I'm so excited to be here with you. Danny, you're probably the only person that could have got me out of bed today, I promise. I'm a little under the weather the last couple of days, but I
Hmm.
was so excited to be able to do this talk with you and all the other educators and counselors that we're going to have on board. So my name is Antoine Mackenzie Plez. I'm a licensed mental health counselor based in Florida. And I own a group private practice called It's All Grief, where we have a team of therapists and life coaches that do this work, that
Hmm.
primarily work in the area of grief and trauma. And right now, we're rolling out some therapy groups for our young folks who are struggling with traumatic loss. As you
Hmm.
guys already know, these last 2 years have been just filled
Hmm.
with a lot of loss, and a lot of our kids are struggling with it. So, what prompted me to write the book was just that, was just how prevalent this issue was coming up in our work,
Hmm.
and realizing that we as a group could only reach so many
Hmm.
families, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so, how do you come up with something that you can give to folks, not just a story, but
Right.
a story that provides some useful things that people can take with them? Because let's face it, not everybody's going to come to therapy.
Exactly.
Not everyone can afford therapy, but you
Hmm.
know what? Hopefully, we have kids who have caring adults in their lives who could say, you know what, I at least have this book and
Hmm.
I at least have this journal. Let's work through it together. Let's talk it out. And this book really gives the parents some verbiage to
Mhm.
work with at all. I think at all different age levels.
Right.
So
And
that's a little brief
let me
intro.
let me ask you, who was this book particularly written for? Did it come from a certain space? Did something happen to say, I want to come from this angle with this story about Kareem?
Absolutely. I get that question all the time. And my simplest answer is Kareem's story is partly my story.
Mm,
And, people come and ask me that, you look just like Kareem. Is this about
mhm,
you? Yeah,
mhm,
in a way. In a
mhm,
way, I've experienced some of the things that Kareem has experienced
mhm,
in this book. And for me, it was really important. Of course, this is going to be a part of a larger series, but it was really important that this first one out the gate came from Black boy
mhm,
experience,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
It
mhm.
was important to me because that's where I'm writing from. I'm writing from my own experience at that age.
Mhm.
I think we talk about representation and how it's
Yes.
so important, even in our psychoeducational
Mhm.
and social emotional educational materials. Our Black boys need to be able to see themselves a little bit more often. Need to be
Mhm.
able to see what vulnerability and masculinity can look like together in the
Mhm.
same space. So that's kind of what that's really the core audience there.
Mhm. Excellent. I want to ask, what's unique about grief when it comes to children in grief? Any specifics that you can share with our audience to give us some insight?
You know, what I will say is there's only really one big difference
Okay.
between child grief and adult grief. Now, there are it shows up in different ways,
Mhm.
even amongst the different age groups, which maybe we'll
Mhm.
get into a little bit later. But really, there's one big difference
Mhm.
between child and adult grief, and that is experience.
Mm.
Children have the same range of emotions that adults have.
Mhm.
Children experience things throughout that same spectrum that
Mhm.
adults have. The difference is they have not had the lived experience to compare it to. So I
Mhm.
posted something like that on my Facebook the other day about how when a child loses their friend, that's the
Mhm.
biggest loss in the world to them at that
Mhm.
point. And
Mhm.
you as an adult, you say, "Oh, that is not a big deal. You're gonna have many more
Exactly.
Johnnies come around in your life." They don't know that yet. They don't
Mhm.
have the
Exactly.
experience to compare that to. So that's
Mhm.
the real big difference. And I think that's the thing that adults have to remember when responding to
Mhm.
even abstract loss, where we're not even talking about you lost a person died. What about when I just can't go play outside with my friends anymore because we're in
Mm.
quarantine, right? Like
Mhm.
being able to understand that, yes, I know that according to our 40, 50 years on earth, we know it's not a big deal. Things are going to come back around at some point. To them, they don't know that. They
They
haven't lived through
don't.
enough things. And so that's
Mhm.
really the big, big difference.
Hmm. And I was doing a training on grief, and one of the things that the trainer mentioned, and he mentioned most of our experiences or how we deal with grief is basically predicated by previous times that we've experienced grief, and
Absolutely.
sometimes we forget where that experience came from because sometimes it's very early on where we learn we don't talk about that. We
That's
don't cry
right.
in this house.
Mm-hmm.
Dad is in a great place and that's all you say. But you don't
Mm-hmm.
you don't allow the kid to have that opportunity to use the words, to feel the feelings, to feel the emotion, and to actually process. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we tend to forget that we were once children and we did
Mm-hmm.
not have the emotional capacity to process like a grown adult. So I
That's
like when
right.
you said that because I want to remind us as adults that the processing abilities of children are so different from ours as adults. And we have to be mindful. And sometimes we have to learn some skills to help in those capacities.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Another thing I wanted to ask you about, um, so we talk about grief and we talk about trauma sometimes interchangeably. Is it possible, Antoine, that you could give us some insight as to some differences as to those two?
Oh, differences. I think you got the wrong person for differences
Okay,
because my practice is called It's All Grief,
it's
right?
all
And
good.
and we see that we say that for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
So we work from the premise that all loss is trauma and
Mm.
all trauma is loss, right?
Mm.
And so let me just to kind of give an example. So when we lose someone,
Mhm.
especially as Kareem does in this book, and as so many of our young folks over the last 2 years have, when
Mhm.
you have lost someone in a really scary and traumatic way,
Yes.
it changes something about the way you see the world. It
Mhm.
changes something about how safe you feel the world is and
Mhm.
how fair you feel the world is.
Mhm.
Well, what happens when we experience trauma? It is the same sum total effect.
Mhm.
When we experience trauma, we experience a loss of safety. Depending on the trauma, we experience that same feeling that the
Mhm.
world does not feel like a safe place or as safe
Mhm.
as
Mhm.
it once felt or as predictable as it
Mhm.
once felt.
Mhm.
So that's why we go from that premise that all loss is trauma and all trauma is loss. And so a
Okay.
lot of the times when people are coming to us to work on traumatic experiences, we take them through a grieving process. We
Excellent.
say to them, let's look at what you lost with this experience.
Mhm.
Let's look at what it feels like you no longer have in the world anymore. Sometimes I lost my self-esteem. Sometimes I lost my sense of connection.
Mhm.
So yeah, I see those two things as running neck and neck.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for that explanation.
No problem.
Antoine, great, great, great information. I don't want you to leave. I just want you to go in the green room, chill out for a little
Okay.
bit. And then
Okay.
I'm going to bring a few more guests up and we're going to talk a little bit and we're going to bring you back at the end. How about that?
Awesome. Awesome.
All right. Thank you so much. My next person that I want to talk to is Marcin Weatherall. Marcin Weatherall. Marcin is a phenomenal. The intervention. She's over intervention, and she does a phenomenal job at organizing that, and she helps so many people through her direction. So, Marcin Weatherall, come on up.
Hi, Danny.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm
Former,
okay.
I like to call you former boss lady. Just love, love, love you. So today, you and I have worked on this for quite some time, but I really want to make this plain for our viewers as to some of the things that our young people are going through. What are some of the things that you see our students experiencing in your particular role?
The last 2 years have been real. There's been a lot of compounded grief, lots of loss. And I always talk about the fact that all of our kids have experienced significant loss, even if it's not just death. We concentrate a lot on death, and
Hmm.
there's loss of life as our kids once knew it. There's
Hmm.
loss of social contact and connection, and
Yes.
our kids have not had the ability to grow like they need
Hmm.
to in a school environment or in a social environment. And so we're seeing a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression from isolation. And our kids just don't have the resiliency skills and
Hmm.
the coping skills that they need. And so we're concentrating on that a lot
Hmm.
in the intervention program and in the school district.
Yes.
Um, they feel lost, and there's a
Exactly.
lot of low self-worth,
Hmm.
lack of feeling of purpose.
Hmm.
Um, and so there's just a downward spiral with our
Right.
kids of all grade levels.
Marcine, I want to ask, do you feel like some of these problems for our children and even for our faculty and staff, they've kind of always been there, but because of the pandemic, they've been illuminated?
I think those issues have always been there. I think they have been intensified, and I think people, they get to a peak and they blow, and they can't hold it. So people have not been able to bury and deal with those internal struggles like they have before, which was not healthy anyway. But now people are exploding.
Right.
And so we see trauma all around us. It's evident at this point.
I want to talk a little bit about the adults that we see in the educational system. How are they dealing with, the grief, the loss? And we're just not talking about death. We're talking about the loss of life as I have known it in so many capacities.
They're struggling, Danny.
Struggling. Okay.
Our teachers, our educators, our administrators, they're struggling. They're struggling bad. And they don't really have the time or the access to self-care that they need, or it's overwhelming, and they're not in a position to best serve our students because they're not in a good place.
Exactly.
And so we've concentrated a lot over the last 2 years on taking care of the adults so that they can take care of our students. It's become our priority to work with and support our staff and try to come up with some additional programming to help them.
Marcin, do you feel like the adults, they reach out for help when they need it, or are they still just trying to plow ahead and make things happen?
I think they're trying to plow ahead and make things happen. I think more adults have come forward than ever before, but I don't know that they feel safe in doing so. There's still a stigma, surrounding mental health or just emotional wellness. What does that mean? And will I appear to be weak? And so they just plow ahead. They believe that showing that strength is what they should be doing always, and they don't want to appear to be weak. And I've really been working hard to help staff and adults understand it's okay not to be okay.
It's okay not to be okay. And as we were talking about that earlier with Antoine, so much of this is historically connected to messaging and what we've been told about seeking help and asking for help. And I often tell my clients, and I tell the adults, I said, you're going to have to model what you want your child to show. If you want them to show their emotions, if you want them to share with you what they're experiencing and how this is affecting them, you have to model that behavior. But I always say sometimes some of our adults have not had permission or the ability to operate in that particular capacity of being fully vulnerable and being able to be emotional.
Absolutely. Our parents are in panic mode and dealing with high anxiety. And so, of course, that's what our kids see as well.
I want to read what Tashara said again. If we could put that back up there as I have. Okay. As a counselor, I'm very intentional about my self-care. I must refuel myself daily in order to be who and what I need to be for others. So I like this hope pusher, Dr. Jackson, because we have to be intentional about doing the things that make us better. A lot of times in counseling, when things don't come easy for us, we like to stop. And we don't recognize that some things don't come easily and we have to work at those things. So I think what we have to do is continue to rally around others and let them know that it's okay to say I need help. It's okay to say I need support. Thank you so much, Marcin, for being with me this evening. I don't want you to go nowhere. Take a seat in the green room for a little while, and we'll be back to you. Awesome.
Right.
Thank you so much. Okay, we're gonna bring Wes. We're gonna bring Wes Upton. Wes Upton is a lead counselor in the school system, and we're gonna bring him up. Hey, Wes.
Hi there, Danny. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thank you so much for participating in this show with me. I want to bring to you, I'm going to go right into it because we have a lot to get to. What are some of the losses that your students are experiencing, and how are we addressing those concerns as adults?
Yeah, so I think as we've gone into this pandemic, we really
abruptly just stopped life, as we all experience as adults too. There was a moment in March 2020 where the doors of the school just closed, and all of us just kind of went into our homes and said, what is this going to be, a minute? Is this going to be a week? And it turned out to be weeks, and then months, and then it trickled into the whole next school year. And so, for a group of students, when we talk about our young people, you just had this moment in time where they lost all of their experiences, and really just the school just was closed and doors closed. They went into their own individual worlds, and so you lost a sense of closure for one group of students. For example, those that were graduating, and those that should have maybe would have normally experienced like a prom and a graduation ceremony. Those things just dropped off, and that was lost. And then for everyone, they lost those connections to their peers, and this is adults and students alike. Just that's the part that I think is still lingering today, is where did those connections drop off, and then how hard or easy was it to drop back in and be able to say, okay, I can restore those where they were, because it seems very, very challenging for so many of our students and us.
I was thinking about the word normal and typical, and are our students, do you feel like students are getting back to normal, whatever normal is? Do you feel like students are doing that?
Yeah, so to some degree, I like to be very optimistic in the way I see this world, right? And so that's the way I have to live my life, and so I am seeing some restoration of students getting back into some sense of what I would call traditional. I don't know if there's normal again. We're changed as a result of this experience collectively. But man, it's taken its toll, and it's taken its toll in terms of just seeing I loved what Antoine and Marcin have been able to share so far in terms of this grieving and really going through this process. And as we all know, in this mental health world, I mean, we are going through the stages of grief, and I'm hopeful that we're seeing some of that work being done. But man, we've definitely grieved, and we've lost, and that's time and experience. And I loved what Antoine said too about the experience piece of our kids really not having much to pull from when this experience has come into their lives, and not really knowing what to address as a child, and saying, I can't go hang out with my friends right now. I can't go do the normal things that I want to do. That part is tough, but I'm really hopeful we're seeing our kids starting to restore to some of what we would call normalcy, perhaps.
So would you say, though, that for the most part, I was thinking, I like to think about the adults. Are adults communicating to you their needs?
Yeah, I think I've seen more communication from adults and staff members and parents, quite honestly, as well, that I work with, that are really sharing, how hard some of this has been for them. And I think that's something that is actually, it's increased, and that's probably maybe not a result of people just being more open, but likely a result of people just having more needs at this time. Right. I mean, I'd like to believe that people are more vulnerable and that sort of thing, but I'm not 100% sure that's the case. I just think people really are having more needs. And so as a result of that, they are at least having the ability to say, I reach out to someone that I trust, and that I know that I can share this experience with, and seek to have some resources made available, and seek some support along the way.
Last question for you. Do you feel, and not just the school you work at, but I'm thinking about schools in general, do you feel like schools were equipped to handle what they were put into, which was the pandemic?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I don't know that any of us were really ready for what was going to come. It was such an unpredictable, hopefully once in a lifetime experience. And so an analogy that's used in some of these circumstances right now is really trying to build a plane while it's in the air, right? You're trying to make it up as you go. You're responding to what's going on, and you didn't really have time necessarily to plan for these things. So a lot, that's again, another positive thing from this is so much growth and learning has taken place, but it's had to be really quickly and adjust it as you go, and making those fine tunings as you go to be able to make sure that you're supporting what people need and our students need for sure.
Wes, thank you so much for sharing that information and giving your insight. I want you to hang out with me in the green room and come back in a few minutes and we'll talk a bit more.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Thanks, Danny.
Thank you. All right, my next person up, we're just going to go right into it. We're going to have Audrey Wilson Youngblood. Audrey Wilson, she is a Wilson Youngblood. She's a librarian and she brings a wealth of information. I just see her, I've seen her engagement with students. So I like that she has a pulse of what's going on with students. And that's something that I've always noticed with her because there's a constant flow of students who go to the library. So I'm interested to hear from Audrey Wilson Youngblood. Hey, Audrey,
Hi, Danny. It's
how
so
are
good to
you?
be here. I'm doing well, thank you.
Excellent. Um, okay. Okay. All righty. So Audrey, I am so excited that you came today and that you're here with us tonight. Now, my biggest question, why do you think it's so hard right now?
No, Danny.
That's a huge question. But why do you think it's so hard and just go with wherever you want to go?
Oh, you saved like the biggest question for me so far. Wow, okay.
But you're capable.
Thank you. Thank you for seeing me, my friend.
Mhm.
I I think it is so hard. What Antoine said about the world does not feel safe right now.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think Marcin talked about how, adults are in trauma, adults are in loss, and we've talked about
Mhm.
educators. I think it's
Mhm.
so hard because it doesn't seem to matter what space you occupy right now or where you're
Mhm.
sitting, what side of the table you're on, if you're in or outside of the classroom,
Mhm.
nothing feels safe right now.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that is multifaceted and intersectional.
Mhm.
It we're maybe perhaps beginning to feel safer in our health,
Mhm.
but we're not safe emotionally and we're not safe in our mental well-being. And our communities are dealing with so much pain and loss.
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
because this isn't just something that happened to education; it happened to the collective community,
Exactly.
and so it permeates.
Mhm.
And as hard as we can to create the type of environment our students need to thrive and our educators need to thrive within the schools, it is completely intertwined with what's happening outside of our schools. And
Mm.
it's we can take steps forward and we can focus on doing the work.
Mhm.
um, but
It's hard.
it's hard. It's so much bigger than us.
It is. I want to piggyback off of what you said. Maslow has his hierarchy of
Mhm.
needs, and one of the things I was doing when I did this presentation, and I've done Maslow for years. However, something stuck out for me, and we were talking about achievement, and we can't truly achieve when we don't feel safe. And if
Right.
we look at the hierarchy, safety comes before achievement.
Hmm.
And I can't necessarily think about what I'm reading, my next paper,
Hmm.
um, anything school related because I'm worried about the normalcy, the continuum of what I know.
Hmm.
Everything was disrupted.
Yeah.
So until I can feel safe, and a
Hmm.
lot of times our children, they get their measurements of safety from the adults.
Oh, yes.
And adults, sometimes we think that we're keeping it away from the kids or from the children, and we're really not.
Right.
Evan said it feels like everything is a battle when it shouldn't be that way. Oh, that's so true.
Hmm.
So I think sometimes we really have to go back to some of the baseline kinds of things and just making sure that we're having those conversations.
Hmm.
We're nurturing the kids. We're talking to them about their thoughts, their feelings. What part of this makes you feel unsafe and unsure? And just learning how to have those conversations.
Hmm.
Um, I have one more question, Audrey, and I'm not going to make it that hard for you because I know you.
I'll take the hard ones. I can do hard things,
I
Danny.
know
It's
you
okay.
can. I know you can. Would you say that some of these things have always been in place with our students and with our faculty, and the pandemic exhausted us even more? What are your
Yes,
thoughts?
I think they were definitely they were all there,
Mm-hmm.
um, every bit of it, and the loss and the collective grief has amplified.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, and we can't meet their academic needs when we haven't met their basic needs.
Mm-hmm.
And same goes with our educators. We can't ask our
Mm-hmm.
educators to raise up our students in terms
Mm-hmm.
of their performance and their gaps
Mm-hmm.
and their needs until they feel safe that
Mm-hmm.
they're able to meet their needs, which I think
Exactly.
is somewhat of an elephant in the room, that
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that educators feel safe
Mm-hmm.
asking students a simple question like, "How are you feeling today?"
Exactly.
Um, so
Okay.
that's my thought.
I appreciate that. But safety is the baseline of our very existence.
Mhm,
You know, we know from previous times that we oftentimes fought for our safety and our existence.
mhm,
And this pandemic kind of took some of that power away that we thought we had. And I think the pandemic allowed us to recognize, like, Mm, you really are not that in charge as much as you think.
mhm,
And so now we're having to adjust with, people, adults, children, understanding that, there are different things in life that we can't control. And sometimes we have to adjust. And I
mhm,
think about some of the students I taught who did not have to deal with a lot of adjustment.
mhm.
And so when adjustment came, it was really really difficult for them to move forward because they're used to a certain baseline.
Yeah,
So
and our teachers,
and our
our
teachers.
educators, same. We were used to
Exactly.
a baseline. We
Hmm.
were used to a rhythm, and
Hmm.
that rhythm was completely disrupted.
The rhythm was totally disrupted.
Mm.
Audrey, thank you so much for
Thank you,
being with me
Danny.
tonight. I don't want you to leave. I
I
want
won't.
you to come back, be a part of the panel at the end. But thank you so much for your insight. Um, I want to take a few of those messages that came up, Jasmine. If we could put maybe the last couple. After working in the school district and now working as an LPC, I believe that it's important to promote safe, stable, and nurturing the environment where the children's lives are important. That's Regina Hood. Thank you so much for chiming in, Regina. Yes, we're in a place to where we have to provide safety for our students. All right, thank you for that one. Let me see that next one. As a parent, getting my support system or village involved, that's Tanya Campbell, with having multiple sources to have a safe place to be heard. As a counselor, being one of those safe places to offer strategies. I love that, Tanya. I love that you recognize your position as being a safe place, a place where children and families and adults can harbor some of those concerns and those feelings of not feeling safe. Thank you so much for that one. Jeff, we've been on a harvest model of education for years, and now we have to do something different while trying to rewrite a template. I think Wes said that similar, like you're in the plane in the air, but you're trying to fix the plane while you're in the air. That's exactly what we're trying to do. And I have to admit, I do see some benefits of the pandemic because we would not have been forced to change. My practice would not have gone virtual had I not been in a pandemic. So it affects us all. Want to bring my next person up? Want to bring my next person up? That is Lawrence Randall. Lawrence Randall, come on up. Hey, can't hear you, Lawrence. You're muted.
I was
Okay.
on mute. Sorry, I
Oh,
did that
hey,
intentionally.
thank you. Thank you so much, Lawrence, for being here. Lawrence is a school counselor and he does phenomenal work You work with all young men, correct?
Yes, sir. All boys 6 to 8.
Okay. What has been your impression of what you've seen in the school system? I'm just going to let you go when it comes to the pandemic and grief in schools.
Okay. Just like a lot of the other panel guests have mentioned, there are increased cases of anxiety disorders.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing cases of depression in our males.
Mm-hmm.
And the expectations, just like Ms. Youngblood was talking about, since the expectations have been modified, performance has suffered. We've lost the rhythm, the rhythm and the way we used to move through education, and so we're struggling trying to get back in cadence.
Mm-hmm.
There's been an increase in aggressive behaviors and bullying behaviors, instances of mutual combat. There's all kinds of things going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then also you got the widespread apathy, the disconnection, and then we talked about also just the lack of trust.
Mm-hmm.
The lack of trust that for the system itself, and that the system or anyone in the building can keep them safe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly. You talked about the rhythm and the cadence. How difficult do you think that's going to be to get that back intact, or do you feel like it's already on the way?
I mean, that's a tough question. Let me think. All right, after that question again, let me think about it. Okay, what is going to take to get it back?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean,
that rhythm and that cadence.
It's just tremendous effort from everyone. At the campus I'm at right now, we have a brand new principal,
Mm-hmm.
and when you have someone who leads the way he leads, behind closed doors and on the open, always demanding excellence from the staff and from the students. I mean, it starts there, but everybody has to buy in, and that's what's expected. But like we said before, a lot of people's the basic needs aren't being met, and so teachers are given all these higher expectations. There's more documentation, more big ideas, and for instruction and all these things, and everything falls on the teacher's back, but they're not getting extra support.
Right.
They're not receiving anything additional, and so we're trying to be better, trying to improve, but we're not, like I said, giving enough support and what's needed.
Why do you think most of the educators are throwing, well, I'm not going to say most, I'm going to say some of the educators are throwing in the towel? And that we know you're speaking just for you.
Okay. Well, as I saw it, teachers took the brunt of the burden when we tried to return to this normalcy. And like I said before, there isn't a lot of support for teachers as the individual, but they added to demand. And so, like I said before, the added documentation, the differentiation, they asked, more data, more management issues. It's just more of everything. And then, just like we're talking about educators, but they're also having to respond to parents. Parents are reacting to the strain of the pandemic, and they're taking it out on the educators. So,
you said something major. You said we're trying to do normal in an abnormal situation. Come on, I'm gonna say that again. We are trying to do normal in an abnormal situation. And I really feel like that's what education has always done. We have always pushed, 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 and we don't always replenish. And then think about we're bringing this pandemic into play, but we had some issues and concerns earlier when it came to our educational structure and our educational model and our templates that we use. And so that's why I say the pandemic kind of shook us up to recognize there are aspects of education that we need to do something differently.
Oh yeah, most definitely. We need systematic change just across the board. And I don't have all the answers. I wish I did, but I know that something has to change. We have to do things differently to get through this. We're trying to do the same old thing. We're throwing more tutoring. We're throwing a lot of the same old using the same old tools for a new problem. And we need to try to catch up.
Yes. Let me ask you this. What is your biggest struggle right now as an educator?
Okay.
Um, as a school counselor, we try to be the heart of the school. You're the glue. You're trying to bring everybody together and keep
Mm-hmm.
everybody just vibing and encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard. It's hard. It's difficult to continue to encourage because I can't find the other words to say it, but it seems like we're just blowing smoke. We're saying the same old thing. We're pushing the encouragement. Let's try this. We're pushing the self-care, but who has the time? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how are they given time to make this happen? Who is given the opportunity to take time to better themselves, to be able to step away from the rat race, so at school and at home, to actually take the time to do what they need to just check in with themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You talked to, I think it was West talking earlier
Mm-hmm.
about how he spoke to a lot more teachers. And so when we first came back from the pandemic, I had a lot of teachers in my office.
Mm-hmm.
Students were still half virtual, half in person, but teachers were in and out of the office, having severe sessions, 30 minutes here, 20 minutes here during
Mm-hmm.
conference time. But since we've been back and everybody's back in person, I know the teachers still need that, but they don't have the opportunity. So they're in there, they're grinding. Next thing you know, they're dragging their cases or their little rolling carts home, just to try to recharge and try to do it again. So it's tough trying to encourage and trying to keep people uplifted,
Yes.
and keep people motivated, students and teachers.
Lawrence, I think one of the things that we have to do is give people permission to be tired. We need to give people permission to say, I don't have all the answers, like you just said. We need to be able to give people permission to say, you know what? Go home and try it again tomorrow.
Yeah.
We need to slow down and attend to the needs.
Yes, sir.
I know that's easier said than done on this side of the table, but I do believe that we have to slow it down to meet the needs of our students, our parents, faculty, staff. We have to slow down and attend to the needs.
And I've said this for a while. I'm sorry to cut you
Mhm.
off, but it's just leading with grace. We need a space for grace for
Yeah.
everyone involved. Everyone involved. We need just a little extra opportunity for grace.
Leading with grace. I love that. I love that. What I want to do right now, I want to bring all the panelists, all the guests back on, and we're going to do a quick panel really, really fast and just kind of talk about where do we go from here? What's next? How do we collectively move forward? How do we collectively move forward? Is anybody itching to jump on top of that question? If not, I'll just pick someone. How do we collectively move forward?
I'll jump in.
Okay, sure.
And this is going to sound like I'm not answering your question, but just stay with me for a second.
Mhm.
For me, it's been about meaningful and authentic connection every day, even if it's one person. And in my work in supporting other educators, I've shared that goal.
Mhm.
If we can all collectively agree to a goal of meaningful connection,
Mhm.
I feel like we can move the needle.
That's good.
Because if we're connecting, then we're saving space for one another, and we're meeting each other where we are,
Okay.
grace and tact. So that's simple,
Great.
but I feel like it's something that's I can control.
I like that. Something that you can control. You can control meaningful conversation and connection and grace and tact. That's something that you can control. Marcine, I want to pass that over to you. What are your thoughts?
I know it seems simple and cliche, but kindness, we've gotten away from just being kind,
Mm.
which, as a whole offers access and support that so many people need. There's been so much division, and disconnect and isolation that has occurred. And we've really gotten away from just kindness, and a small act of kindness collectively
Mhm.
will make a huge difference. And I think we in the mental health field and profession, we need to make sure that we are kindly offering access to our
Mhm.
services, and that we are being supportive of those that are in need, readily, immediately supportive.
Excellent. 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 Wes, I want to ask you that same question. How do we collectively move forward?
Yeah, I mean, I love what Audrey and Marcin have said so far, and I think it's just about really holding space for one another and making sure that we have genuine connections with our peers and our colleagues and our friends and our families, and making time for those things. And maybe I need to rephrase that: not making time for those things, making time for those people. Not as much time for the things. And taking a moment to really connect with those that are around us, and realizing that support that we can push forward to other people will be reflected back upon us, and it will continue to fill those that are around one another by being so intentional with our time for other people.
I want to ask a question on the panel real fast. Do you feel like we know how to hold space for each other? Because I sometimes think that's a skill that we say it, and I think we say it as educators. I think we say it as counselors, but sometimes I think general audience. What does that mean to hold space? What does that truly mean to hold space? Anyone want to jump on that?
I'll answer your question. Do we know how to hold space for one another? I don't think so. I think that trauma makes us selfish. When you're hurting and when you're in pain, you're selfish, and it's hard to make space for other people. You have to be intentional about that. And I've learned that helping others helps me, but it's you have to be intentional about doing that. And right now, I think that we are living selfishly because we're in pain.
That's good. That's good. That's good. Anyone else want to comment on that?
You know, I agree with what Marcin said. For me, holding space for someone else is almost like an antidote to my own trauma, because I'm moving through my trauma and my loss by finding the new meaningful connections through others. Because I don't have nostalgia. I'm not going to be able to go back, but it's when you're in that trauma, you're so prickly. Everything prickles. It just, everything hurts. But we know we need other human beings to start to kind of smooth out some of those thorns and thistles. But I'd like to hear some other panelists' thoughts on how we could explain what holding space means and looks like.
I want to interject real fast. You said something that was huge. And you were just talking about finding new meaning. Finding new meaning. Anytime I work with a client and we talk about grief, we talk about retelling the story. And as you retell the story, many times there's going to be a little added part that you add to the story. Sometimes it's going to be good, sometimes it's not going to be so good. But as you tell the story, it's almost cathartic as you tell the story, and you start to recognize small pieces or small differences. Or maybe you say, oh, I didn't realize that was there. But I think we have to slow down and find, first of all, we find meaning, and then we find new meaning. Okay, anyone else want to comment on that? How do we hold space?
So if I may jump in, so one of the things that happens when people start talking to me about the relationship challenges that they're having with other people, such as not being able to hold space for other people, my question is, in what ways you have that same struggle with relationship with yourself? So my experience is that it's much more difficult for us to hold space for others if we are not actively engaged in the process of holding space for ourselves.
Oh, that's good.
And that's why, one of the things that I push for adults and for children, as I did in the little promo video, is journaling. Something that we do not do enough of. We used to do it so well as kids up until they started grading our journal entries and telling us that we didn't put the commas in the right places and that we didn't spell the words right. We used to do such a great job
Antoine,
of.
Antoine,
Mhm.
I taught third grade. I wasn't a teacher like that. I say just make it as messy. I just want to hear your
There you
thoughts.
go.
So I'm just letting you know I wasn't in that group. Go ahead,
There you go.
Antoine. I'm
Good for
sorry.
you. Good for you. But I teach adults too how to check
Mhm.
in with yourself.
That's
That's one
right.
of the exercises that you'll see repeated in the grief journal that we have for the kids. But I tell you, don't be fooled. These books and these journals are for adults too. Lots
Mhm.
of adults are learning
Yes.
how to check in with their own grief. But it's really
Mhm.
learning how to ask yourself simple questions. And we start
Yes.
off with some simple ones. Today I feel. Today I need. Today I release or let go
Mm.
of.
Mm.
Today I forgive. And
Ooh,
there's this simple little set of prompts that you could do 5 minutes a day, just checking in with yourself, and watch what it does for your ability to hold space for other people.
that's
So
good.
that's my
That's good.
contribution.
That's good. Thank you so much, Antoine. So Katina says journaling, writing is therapeutic for me. Me too, Tina. I love to write. It's therapeutic for me. I never thought I would write a book, and I ended up writing for like 5 or 6 books, and I was shocked. But most of that writing came from pain points, and so I think you should write. Thank you so much for reminding us that, Antoine. Um, we're coming to the end of the show, and I just really want to give my complete thanks to my guest today. What an amazing show. I think we didn't have enough time to really get into everything that I wanted to get into, but we scratched the surface and we gave it a start. We're letting you know that there are needs when it comes to our students, faculty, and staff, when it comes to the grief that they're experiencing. And we have to be mindful that just because I'm wearing a smile on my face, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm smiling on the inside. So we have to be mindful of where each person is and what may be going on in their lives. Um, I want to share with you a few things coming up with DLR Counseling Group. And yeah, that's coming up. So, first thing, if you liked today, we're going to have buried messages. It's a grief workshops, grief in challenging times. We want to make sure that you have the supports that you need. This is June the 4th, 2022. It's a virtual online conference from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Only $10. I want to give you some techniques and some strategies to help you deal with some of the grief and some of the loss. So I really want you to go ahead and sign up for that. When you see that come out, I want you to sign up for that. Thank you so much. And then we have the Brotherhood. The Brotherhood is going nice and strong. We're up to like 15 brothers, and we're doing our planned events, and we're doing some outings and different things of that nature. So we're having a great time in the Brotherhood. What else? Oh, I want you to shop the collection of the messages.net. You can get this whole collection, the entire collection, for 50 bucks. All of the books that I've written in ebook form. And so buried messages is one of those. It's related to grief, and then we have those related to parenting, and we have those related to teens and children. So we want you to get those books. And the next thing that we have is Kareem learns to cope with traumatic loss. You just heard Antoine talk about some of his books. Well, talk about his book. It is a must. You need to get the book and you need to get the workbook. Don't put it off. I give it my full endorsement unabashedly. This is a great resource. Go out and get Antoine's book. Okay, I think that's it. I want to say to you guys, thank you so much for attending the show tonight. I know that it was I know it's a school night, and I appreciate when anyone chooses to spend their evening with me. Thank you so much. Have a great night. Let's keep in mind that somebody is going through, And not let's just ask that one time, but let's ask a second time, how are you really feeling? And let's be intentional about looking into their eyes and listening. Thank you so much. Have a great night and have a great weekend.